The mark of ice and blood. The wind howled through the endless expanse of white, biting at the young man's skin as he stumbled through the storm. His breath froze in the air, hanging like a ghost. Every step felt heavier as he waded through the thick snow, but he couldn't stop. Somewhere out there, his tribe was moving toward the distant mountains, and he was alone. He had become separated during the hunt when the storm descended like a living thing. Now, all that remained was the frozen wasteland, stretching endlessly in every direction. His heart pounded as he quickened his pace. He needed to find shelter. The temperature was dropping, and the sky darkened with the approach of night. Through the swirling snow, he saw it. A cave, barely visible under a ridge of ice. Without hesitation, he ran. The storm clawed at him, slowing his steps, but he pushed forward, driven by a primal need to survive. As he neared the cave, he froze. The wind stilled, leaving an unnatural silence, and at the mouth of the cave, strange symbols carved into the ice caught his eye. They glowed faintly, their twisted shapes flickering as if alive. His stomach churned, but he couldn't turn back. He stepped into the cave. Inside, the cold was worse, biting into him as he knelt to light a fire. The flames sputtered to life, offering little warmth against the suffocating chill. Shadows danced across the cave walls, twisting into eerie shapes, and an unsettling stillness filled the air. That's when he heard it. A faint whisper, carried on the wind just outside the cave. It was impossible. The storm was too loud, too violent, but the whisper was unmistakable, sliding through the air like a voice speaking directly into his mind. His breath caught, and slowly he turned toward the cave's entrance. A shadow stood just beyond the firelight, tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It moved forward, jerking unnaturally, its tattered form flickering in and out of the darkness. The young man's heart pounded in his chest as the shadow stepped into the cave, its skeletal limbs stretching impossibly long. He bolted deeper into the cave, his breath ragged. The creature followed, its movement unnaturally fast, its glowing eyes fixed on him. He stumbled through the darkness, the walls narrowing around him, but he couldn't outrun the thing that hunted him. The whispers grew louder, filling his head, twisting into ancient words that clawed at his mind. His feet slid on the icy ground, and he crashed into a small chamber at the end of the cave. There, half buried in the ice, were human bones, remnants of travelers long forgotten. His eyes widened in horror as he realized the cave wasn't a refuge, it was a tomb. The creature loomed closer, its body bending and warping unnaturally as it closed in. The young man scrambled back, his hand brushing against something on the wall. The same symbols he had seen at the cave's entrance. They pulsed with faint light. Desperation took hold. He had no idea what the symbols meant, but they were his only hope. He slashed at them with his spear, dragging the tip through the glowing carvings. The cave roared to life. Light exploded from the walls, and the creature shrieked, recoiling in agony as the chamber shook violently. The young man stood frozen, watching as the light tore through the creature's form, unraveling it like smoke in the wind. But it wasn't gone. With a final ear-splitting wail, the creature lunged at him, its claws outstretched. He slashed at the symbols again, triggering a wave of energy that flung the creature into the far wall. The cave trembled, ice falling in jagged chunks as the creature dissolved into the shadows. Silence filled the chamber. The symbols dimmed, their power fading, and the young man collapsed to his knees. He had survived, but something still clung to him. His hands trembled as he looked down at his arm, where the symbols had seared into his skin, glowing faintly beneath his flesh. The whispers had stopped, but their echo lingered in his mind. Staggering to his feet, he stumbled out of the cave, the storm now calm. The mountains loomed ahead, distant but clear, and beyond them, his tribe waited. He was free, or so he thought. He moved through the frozen landscape with grim determination, his thoughts clouded with exhaustion and the memory of the creature. The wound on his arm throbbed, and every now and then, the faint glow of the symbols flickered under his skin. It felt as if the darkness from the cave was still with him, watching, waiting. After hours of walking, the camp finally came into view. His people emerged from their shelters, relief flooding their faces as they rushed to meet him. "Where have you been?" the elder asked, his voice filled with concern. "We feared you were lost to the storm." I got caught in the mountains, the young man said, his voice hoarse, but I found shelter. The elder studied him, his gaze lingering on the wound. You are injured. Come, let us tend to you. The young man nodded, following the elder into the warmth of the camp. The whispers were gone, but his mind wasn't at ease. Something dark still lingered within him. He could feel it, a growing pressure in his chest, tugging at him with each breath. That night, as he lay in the safety of his shelter, wrapped in furs, the whispers returned. Soft at first, barely perceptible, but then they grew louder, more urgent, like the voice of the storm itself speaking through his blood. Kill them. He bolted upright, his heart racing. The whispers echoed in his mind, commanding him, driving him toward madness. He tried to block them out, pressing his hands to his ears, but it was useless. They are weak. You are chosen. His body trembled, and his hand reached for the knife at his side, moving as if controlled by something else. The symbols beneath his skin burned brighter, pulsing with the same ancient power that had saved him in the cave. Only now that power was no longer protecting him. It was consuming him. The first elder didn't stir as the blade slid across his throat. The young man moved through the camp in a haze, his body numb, his mind clouded with the whispers that filled every corner of his consciousness. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows over the fallen bodies of his tribe. Blood soaked into the snow, and still he felt nothing. The whispers guided him, each step calculated, each kill silent. One by one, the bodies fell, lifeless and still, until he was the only one left standing. When the last body hit the ground, the young man stood in the center of the camp, surrounded by the dead. The night was quiet now, the whispers satisfied, his tribe, his people, gone. He looked down at his hands, slick with blood. The symbols on his skin no longer flickered faintly. They glowed bright and constant, a permanent mark of the darkness that had claimed him. He dropped the knife, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the weight of what he had done settled over him. The camp was silent. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows over the fallen, and the young man's chest heaved with the realization of the destruction he had wrought. But it wasn't his fault. It was the cave, the darkness, the ancient power. He looked up at the mountains, knowing what waited beyond them. The whispers had come from the cave, but they hadn't stayed there. They were inside him now, part of him. The darkness had taken him. And as he stood among the bodies of his tribe, a cold smile curled at the corners of his lips. The whispers would never leave.